Reality 1. The echo chamber when your social circle quietly vanishes. That silence the opener hinted at, the one that speaks of the first brutal truth, the quiet disappearance of your world, often begins with an everyday object. Suddenly, the phone in Walter's hand felt like a lead weight, its silence a stark reminder of the voices that no longer called. This isn't just a fleeting feeling of loneliness. It is the tangible experience of your world shrinking, often without warning. This relational shift is a common, yet deeply personal challenge. Friends, once mainstays, pass away. Neighbors, once a source of casual comfort, move on. Siblings grow quiet, their calls less frequent. Even family visits, cherished moments, can become shorter, more rushed, as the demands of others' lives take precedence. It's crucial to understand that this fading of social connections is rarely personal. It is, more often than not, an inexorable consequence of time. Yet, the understanding does little to fill the hollow space it leaves behind, a void felt keenly no matter how strong or independent one remains. Walter, at 84, knew this insidious creep of social isolation intimately. For years, his days had a comforting rhythm, anchored by a morning visit to the same local coffee shop. The staff knew his usual order. His friends, a familiar constellation of faces, would meet him there without the need for a text or call. It was an unspoken agreement, a shared ritual. But over time, the rhythm faltered. One by one, those friends stopped coming. Some passed on, their absence a sharp pang. Others moved, seeking care or different climates. Some simply stopped driving, the small act of getting to the coffee shop becoming too much of an ordeal. One morning, Walter looked around the bustling room, the clatter of cups and murmur of conversations feeling alien. He confessed later, a shadow in his eyes. It's strange to walk into a place where everyone used to know your name, and now you're just the man in the corner booth. A profound sense of loneliness began to set in. This pain of a shrinking circle isn't always loud or dramatic. It doesn't always manifest in visible grief or tears. Sometimes it's the long, echoing silence after dinner, the walk that feels a little too quiet, the sudden, stark realization that the list of people who truly know you, your history, your quirks, your unspoken thoughts, is undeniably getting shorter. And there seems to be no way to stop it. This quiet, often unnoticed thinning of everyday interactions, the diminishing chorus of voices and laughter that once enriched life, is something few are prepared for. However, acknowledging this reality, this gradual fading of the familiar, is the first step towards empowering action. One afternoon, Walter's gaze fell upon a brightly colored flyer tacked to a community notice board. It advertised a local gathering, a simple get-together he would normally ignore, the thought of new faces and forced pleasantries daunting. He hesitated, a familiar wave of reluctance washing over him. But then, a thought, clear and persistent as an internal narrator, cut through the hesitation. Connection doesn't come to you anymore. You have to go get it. The words resonated with a hard truth. The path to mitigating this social isolation required proactive effort, a degree of courage he hadn't needed to summon for such things in decades. He found himself standing before the community center door later that week, the flyer clutched in a hand that trembled slightly. Muffled sounds of conversation and laughter drifted from within, a stark, almost painful contrast to the profound quiet of his own apartment. He could turn back, retreat to the solitude he knew, the predictable silence of his shrinking world. Or, the unspoken choice hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension. This battle for connection is just one front. An even more personal war is often waged within one's own changing physical form, a discovery awaiting others like Gloria. Reality 2. The betrayal when your own body stops bouncing back. While Walter stood at the precipice of a decision, grappling with the external battle for connection, an even more personal war is often waged within one's own changing physical form. A reality Gloria, at 81, was about to confront with jarring clarity. Gloria had always prided herself on her resilience, her sharp mind matched by an active, independent spirit. Her backyard garden was her sanctuary, a testament to her vitality, and she loved walking her neighborhood, staying engaged with her book club. But after a minor tumble while tending her beloved roses, an activity that once brought her simple joy. Her body delivered a verdict she never saw coming. Full stop. Life after 80 has a way of making its presence known unequivocally. The body doesn't just whisper its limits. It speaks them clearly, sometimes shouting them. Little aches that used to be fleeting now linger with stubborn persistence. Fatigue, once dispelled by a short nap, might stretch into the next day, a heavy cloak. The unsettling truth that catches many off guard is how swiftly even small health problems can escalate, changing the landscape of one's life virtually overnight. For Gloria, the fall itself seemed inconsequential at first. However, the aftermath was anything but. What she anticipated as a brief period of rest slowly, relentlessly, turned into months of reduced strength. Her physical decline was palpable. Her confidence, once a bedrock of her personality, began to slip, eroded by the daily reminders of her body's newfound fragility. "I thought I was just taking a break," she would later reflect, a note of frustration in her voice. But her body, her own aging body, had treated it like an irreversible full stop. This is the heart of the unpredictability. One can do everything right, eat well, move gently, get adequate sleep, and still feel as though their body is one step ahead, making decisions without consent. The bounce back, that reliable youthful capacity to recover and return to normal, simply isn't what it used to be. You realize you're not truly bouncing back anymore. You're adapting forward. Gloria would often look out at her overgrown rose bush, once a vibrant symbol of her energy and passion, now an emblem of her former vitality and a source of quiet apprehension. The chronic conditions of her aging body felt like a constant negotiation. Then, one day, her gaze caught on a single, resilient weed pushing its way stubbornly through a tiny crack in the patio near her window. It was a small, almost insignificant thing, yet it represented a tiny defiance of limitations, a testament to the persistence of life. A question formed in her mind. Could she, too, find a new way to grow, to adapt? The bounce might be gone, a casualty of physical decline, but perhaps a different kind of strength, a quieter, more tenacious form, could bloom in its place. Slowly, almost tentatively, Gloria found herself reaching for a small, familiar trowel that lay on her windowsill. Her gaze remained fixed on that defiant weed. The simple act of tending to it, a task she wouldn't have thought twice about in the past, now felt monumental. Would she attempt this small act of gardening, a step towards redefining her limits and reclaiming a piece of her old self? Or would the chilling fear of another full stop, another setback in her ongoing battle with health unpredictability, paralyze her will? Her fingers trembled around the cool metal of the trowel, the memory of her body's betrayal a cold shadow. This intimate struggle with physical limits, this loss of resilience, often leads to another unwelcome guest. The creeping, uncomfortable need for help, a truth Eugene, in his own way, fought with all his might. Reality 3. The surrender when "I can do it myself" becomes a dangerous myth. Gloria's tentative reach for her trowel, a quiet negotiation with her body's new pronouncements, highlighted an intimate struggle with physical limits. This loss of resilience, this feeling that your own body is no longer a reliable ally, often ushers in another unwelcome guest. The creeping, uncomfortable need for help. It was a truth Eugene at 85, a man who had faced down war and built his life with his own two hands, fought with every fiber of his being. One winter morning, he stood staring at his icy driveway as if it were an insurmountable mountain. The thought of asking for assistance, for him, felt like a deeper, more profound wound than any potential fall. The encroachment of dependence rarely arrives with a sudden announcement. Instead, it's a subtle creep, a series of small concessions that, almost unnoticed, begin to reshape daily life. Perhaps it starts with avoiding the high cabinets, a task once performed without a second thought. Or maybe it's gripping the stair railing just a little tighter, a silent acknowledgement of a less certain balance. For Eugene, a man who prided himself on his unwavering self-reliance, these were bitter pills. The emotional sting for the fiercely independent can be particularly sharp. The fear of becoming a burden, of losing autonomy, often leads to hiding these newfound limitations, a dangerous game of pretense. Eugene's story is a testament to this internal battle. He had lived through war, raised for children, and even built his own shed-out back with nothing but spare wood and sheer determination. His independence was legendary, at least in his own mind. Then, one harsh winter, he slipped on that treacherous icy driveway. There were no broken bones, thankfully, just a severely bruised pride. He told no one, but his daughter, with an intuition that felt almost like a gentle, loving intrusion, noticed something was different. She began to visit once a week, bringing groceries and staying for coffee. Initially, Eugene resisted, his gruff, "I'm fine," a standard refrain. But over time, the shared coffee became a cherished ritual, a quiet space where connection could bloom. Eventually, he admitted something that surprised even himself, the words soft but clear. "It's nice, not having to carry everything alone." This shift wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the emergence of a hard-won wisdom. Independence after 80, he was beginning to understand, needed to be redefined. It wasn't about stubbornly doing everything alone, regardless of risk. It was about knowing when to ask for help and, crucially, being brave enough to accept it. Accepting assistance, whether from loved ones or through adaptive aids, wasn't a loss of independence but a strategic way of protecting true independence, the ability to continue doing what matters most, safely. One day, during one of her visits, Eugene's daughter gently suggested installing a grab bar in the shower. Eugene's reaction was immediate and sharp. No! In his eyes, that simple metal bar was not a tool for safety but a glaring symbol of defeat, a public declaration of his failing strength. His daughter, understanding his pride, didn't push the issue. She simply left the brochure detailing the grab bar on his kitchen table. Later, after she had gone, Eugene found himself alone with his thoughts and the silent, glossy pamphlet. He picked it up, the image of the sturdy bar a stark contrast to his own rugged, unyielding pride. He crumpled it in his fist, a surge of frustration rising, then, just as quickly, smoothed it out again, the internal conflict raging. The brochure lay on the table, a silent challenge to his lifelong identity, a question mark hanging over his future. This feeling of diminishing capability, of needing help for tasks once trivial, can sometimes be compounded by an even more insidious shift. The sense that the world itself is starting to look right through you, a painful invisibility that Irene discovered in the most public of places. Reality 4, the vanishing act when the world begins to look right through you. Eugene's solitary struggle with the grab bar brochure, that silent challenge to his lifelong identity, highlighted a deeply personal battle with diminishing capability. Yet, this feeling of needing help can sometimes be compounded by an even more insidious and public shift. The sense that the world itself is starting to look right through you. It's a painful invisibility that Irene, at 86, discovered in the most unexpected of moments. Irene, a dedicated volunteer at the local museum, possessed a living archive of the town's rich history within her sharp mind. She had lived through decades that others only read about. However, one afternoon, when a visitor posed a question about the very era she had experienced so vividly, their eyes and the question slid past her to a younger staffer nearby, as if Irene herself was merely another exhibit. Silent, inanimate, and part of the background. This phenomenon, this creeping sense of becoming invisible, is a subtle yet profoundly painful reality for many seniors. It's often not born of malice. Rather, it's the byproduct of a fast-paced world that too easily forgets that slow steps still carry invaluable stories. A society sometimes so obsessed with youth that it overlooks the immense strength and value of experience accumulated over a lifetime. It happens in countless small interactions. The cashier who looks past you to the person waiting next, the doctor who addresses your adult child instead of you directly, the server at a restaurant who assumes you can't hear, think, or decide for yourself. These moments, though seemingly minor, land with a surprising weight, an emotional thud in the quiet of one's heart. No matter our age, the fundamental human need to be seen, to be acknowledged, persists. When asked later how that specific museum incident made her feel, Irene offered a quiet, sad smile. "I'm used to it," she murmured, the resignation in her voice more telling than any outburst of anger could have been. It was the kind of sadness that comes from being perceived as furniture instead of fire, a passive object rather than a vibrant, contributing individual. But the truth is, you are not furniture. You are not background. Your presence matters. What, then, can be done when faced with this gradual erasure? The answer, though requiring courage, is clear. You speak anyway. You ask the questions. You offer the opinions. You vote. You share your stories, even when no one explicitly asks. You assert your presence, reminding the world and yourself that you are still here, still thinking, still a vital part of the tapestry of life. Sometime later, Irene found herself at another museum event. A similar situation began to unfold. A visitor posed a question, one that touched upon a subject Irene knew intimately. The moment stretched, pregnant with unspoken possibility. She felt that familiar, almost gravitational pull to stay quiet, to retreat into the comfortable, albeit painful, invisibility of being the furniture. But then, something flickered in her eyes, a spark. Perhaps she remembered that inner fire the narrator of her experience had once alluded to. She took a small, almost imperceptible breath, her lips parting as if to form a word. Would she reclaim her voice this time, step out from the shadows of ageism? Or would the ingrained habit of invisibility prove too strong, the words dying unspoken? The small group around the younger staffer was already beginning to turn away, their attention shifting, the window for Irene's elderly voice to be heard rapidly closing. This question of matching, of one's story still holding value if no one seems to see or hear it, can become the heaviest burden when the bustling activities of life slow to a crawl, a profound silence that Stanley, in his own unique way, knew all too well. Reality 5, the shadow of what if, when regret looms and purpose needs a new name. As Irene wrestled with the sting of invisibility, that potent question of matching, of one's story still holding value when the world seems to no longer listen, often becomes the heaviest burden. This weight can feel particularly acute when the bustling activities of a long life slow to a crawl, ushering in a profound quietness. It was a silent Stanley at 88, a retired teacher of 4 decades, knew all too well. He would often survey his quiet living room, the stillness no longer feeling golden or peaceful, but echoing with a chilling sentiment that sometimes escaped his lips in a near whisper. No one needs me anymore. The slowing pace of life after 80, while sometimes welcome, invariably brings with it more space. Space for reflection, for remembering, for replaying life's countless moments. This can, of course, be beautiful, a time of gentle recollection. However, if one is not careful, this expansive quietness can become heavy, saturated with the insidious shadows of regret. It's rarely the loud, dramatic kind of regret, but rather the quiet, persistent ache of "I wish I'd," or the haunting echo of "Why didn't I when I had the chance?" These are the regrets that surface when time is abundant, but the energy or freedom to pursue once postponed dreams or mend old fences may have waned. The unspoken question, "What now?" looms large after a lifetime of defined roles, work, and service. Stanley, despite a long and fulfilling career of which he was justifiably proud, found retirement left him feeling strangely hollow. The daily purpose that had driven him for 40 years had vanished, leaving a void. It is important to understand, as the narrator of his broader life story might clarify, that he hadn't truly run out of purpose. Rather, he just hadn't yet found a new way to be needed. Because purpose, fundamentally, doesn't retire. It simply changes shape. The grand achievements of a career might recede, but new avenues for finding meaning emerge, often in smaller, more intimate forms. Perhaps it's no longer about building houses or leading large meetings, but about building confidence in great-grandchildren with cherished stories, or leading with quiet presence for someone who is grieving, or simply solving a neighbor's momentary loneliness with a genuine smile and a kind word. One sun-dappled afternoon, Stanley found himself on a familiar park bench, lost in these very heavy thoughts, the weight of perceived irrelevance pressing down on him. Nearby, he noticed a small child struggling to get a colorful kite to catch the breeze, their parent looking on with a mixture of encouragement and slight frustration. Stanley, the old Stanley, the dedicated teacher, knew a simple trick for kites. A small piece of wisdom gleaned from years of school fairs and playful afternoons, that Stanley would have stepped in without a second thought. But the retired Stanley, the Stanley cloaked in this newfound hollowness, hesitated. What difference could I make? He thought, the question laced with the bitterness of regret in old age. His potential contribution felt so small, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But then, as quickly as the doubt surfaced, a different thought, a gentler, more hopeful question, nudged its way in. How can I bring light today, even if just a little? The shift was subtle yet profound. Slowly, with a newfound, albeit fragile, resolve, Stanley rose from the bench. He took a tentative step towards the child and the erratically dancing kite, an uncertain smile playing on his lips. The wind whipped the kite's string, a thin, taut line mirroring the delicate thread of hope stirring within him. Would he offer his small piece of wisdom, this simple act of kindness? Perhaps, he mused as he walked, purpose isn't always a grand monument built for legacy or applause, but a series of small, offered lights. Whether the child and parent accepted his help or not, the very act of offering, of reaching out from his post-retirement life, began to fill a tiny part of that gnawing hollowness. These 5 realities, stark and challenging as they are, do not signify the end of the story, but perhaps, as Stanley was beginning to see, the true beginning of its deepest, most resonant chapter. Stanley's tentative step towards connection, that small offering of light, underscores a vital point. These 5 realities, the shrinking social circles, the uncooperative and aging body, the unwelcome need for help, the painful cloak of invisibility, and the looming shadow of regret, while undeniably stark and challenging, do not signify the end of the story. Indeed, they paint a daunting picture. But what if embracing these brutal truths isn't an admission of defeat, but rather the key to unlocking a profound, unshakable inner strength? Confronting these challenges head-on is an act of profound honesty, not a sign of weakness. It signifies a life lived long enough to see existence for what it truly is. Unpredictable, sometimes deeply unfair, yet still imbued with moments of grace and opportunities for meaningful aging. And in this journey, it is crucial to remember that you are not alone. The experiences of Walter, Gloria, Eugene, Irene, and Stanley, in their varied struggles and quiet triumphs, reflect a path navigated by many. What becomes paramount in this unfolding chapter is the enduring power of choice. Even amidst these formidable realities, agency remains. There is the choice to actively seek connection, as Walter considered at the community center door. There is the choice to embrace rest and adaptation, finding new ways to engage with life, as Gloria contemplated with her small trowel. There is the choice to accept help with wisdom, redefining independence, a lesson Eugene slowly learned. There is the choice to speak up, to reclaim one's voice and presence, as Irene found herself on the verge of doing. And, profoundly, there is the choice to find new purpose in small acts of kindness and presence, as Stanley began to explore. This chapter of life, though different, is not a mere epilogue. It is, in many ways, the deep part of the story. It's a phase where every word can carry immense weight, where small gestures often mean more than grand pronouncements ever did. In this space, your presence, your patience, your unique perspective, these become your superpowers, tools for navigating the complexities of aging with dignity and resilience. Reaching your 80s is, without question, a landmark achievement, a testament to decades of love, loss, effort, change, and an unyielding spirit. The path forward may present new and unfamiliar terrain, but it is still yours to shape, informed by late-life wisdom and a strength often forged in vulnerability. Walk it with open eyes, steady hands, and your head